you're an author, a storyteller, a weaver of narratives. Perhaps you could take a crack at starting this narrative from the beginning. How did you hear about this fellow and his work?
Well, Ron and I have been acquaintances, friends for getting on to 20 years now. And Ron, among other things, is an extremely talented editor. And he has also always been a person of enthusiasm for pretty much anything he does. He's also been a publisher. He's published a book of mine, actually, and been the packager on another one. So it was, I guess, a couple of months ago. Was it that long? When he called me up and told me about this design he put together for a World Trade Center memorial. And as he described it, it sounded very impressive. It sounded like something that I'd like to see done. There's a kind of quixotic element in the whole thing, but stranger things have happened, so I feel pretty supportive for the whole enterprise. You guys have seen the design, I'm sure. It's a very massive building that he's put together with covered with gardens, which is a nice idea. It's in that sense, it strikes me as a kind of West Coast idea, but a West Coast idea that would be remarkably welcomed, I think, here in New York, if he could push it forward. And the notion of the two wells of air that are sort of the inverse of the two towers, I think is just a brilliant notion. And in terms of a building that really was a memorial, I think it's a fine idea, and I wish him all the luck in the world with this project. And he's staying here at my place for a few days while he's been sort of running around and moving about and flogging his design and putting out a tremendous amount of energy. And it's very impressive. It's a real turn on to be around it. To just be around the whole project. And so I like the experience very much. It's been one I've gotten a lot out of just by being able to host it.
Have you seen many other designs?
The designs I've seen, by and large, are ones that you see when you surf the web or go to the various CNN spots where they're posting designs of buildings, and of the ones I've seen, certainly this is one of the most creative by far, and it's one that, in terms of its just sensitivity to the situation that it is trying to memorialize, is certainly one of the smartest designs I've seen. I don't know whether Ron mentioned this to you. I can't imagine that he didn't. But among the practical sides of it is that it's actually got more in this structure that primarily functions as a memorial. It's got more space in it, more space for offices than the two towers put together, and that's an extraordinary accomplishment, just in terms of design accomplishment, and I think, I don't know, I think people seriously, there is something. Years ago, when the towers first went up, I remember the first time, I guess they'd been up for 6 or so months. The first time I took a flight, that my plane went across Manhattan, and I remember looking down at the towers out of the plane window. It was a commercial jet airliner, and we were flying relatively low. And I looked down, and I thought, my God, that's a disaster waiting to happen. Some pilot goes nuts and decides that these two things sticking up out of the city, and they really did. They, when you saw them, they just from the air, they were like a huge. I used to call it the great tuning fork in the sky. And I remember, as I said, I remember thinking that's a disaster waiting to happen, whether it be a terrorist, whether it be somebody going crazy. And it's an airline disaster. And I remember on the night of September 11th, at 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and remembered thinking that, 20 years before, 25 years before, when the towers had gone up, and so the idea of having something quite so high, I don't think is kind of, it's asking for it, because I figure if I thought that, when the first time I flew across them, thinking this is something waiting to happen, I wonder about all the other people who must have thought the same thing. Some of them a lot more loony and nutty than I am. Obviously this is one of the things that got thought when the catastrophe occurred. So that I like the idea of a building that's a mere 50 stories high, or 40. What is it? I don't remember the exact number of flights, right. But it's not. I don't think there's any necessity to reproduce the 100+ story edifice. I don't think that's what it should be about. And I think that's one of the things that I like about this. That this is a building that will be a function of the landscape, and an interesting function of the landscape. Those steps would be a really nice addition to what the city looks like from across the river, the various places where one sees the city from when one is outside it. I think that would be a wonderful looking memorial. Mm-hmm. But I also think it has a lot of practical things to it. Everything from the fact that it is not quite so high, the fact that it has more space, office space, than the original, and the fact that it deals with the memorial quality of the enterprise in such a both sensitive and intelligent way. So these are all things that I think are good things. A friend of mine looked at the design and was very much impressed with it. And one of the things he said, and in a way, it's kind of a sad and ironic comment. They'll probably never do it because it's much too good. But nevertheless, if there's something one can do to push it forward, I'm all for it. And that's one of the reasons I has been supportive in my very small way of Ron as I possibly can.
What are Ron's architectural credentials?
As far as I know, he doesn't have any, and more power to him. What he's got is an extraordinary idea, and he's been pursuing that idea and pushing it on in a very I think, intelligent way. For someone who doesn't, given the fact that he doesn't have the credentials, he's been learning a great deal. He's been talking to architects, other architects. He's been talking to. He's had a couple of architects have actually gone in already and done in some interior sketches for him, and those are they've obviously the architects who've done this have been obviously turned on by his idea in ways that are really nice. And he's going to probably pursue that. With one of the things he's talked to me about is possibly going to architecture schools and spreading the notion around there. And I think he wants to get a sort of grassroots response to this, because I think he has a sense that if something like this is to happen, a lot of people have to like it and have to be able to express the fact that they like it. And it's the kind of idea that when people see it, they get very excited about it. I did, and as I said, I wish him all the luck in the world.
And what do you remember when the first set of plans came out? What was it, like 6 months ago or something like that?
You mean Ron's plans or someone else's?
The official plans that were
I didn't see too many of that. I haven't seen too many of those. The ones I have seen, and you know, I've seen a mere 65 or 70 plans for the world, which puts me in a, as somebody who hasn't seen most of them, because there are hundreds of them, and hundreds of people. I mean, probably every architectural firm in the country has come up with a notion for the memorial. Every architecture school has mounted a project to do something like this, and so there must be, as I said, hundreds, if not thousands. Yet you like the ones I've seen. None of them have. First of all, I haven't been as close to any of them as I've been to Ron's. But of the ones I have seen and spent some time looking at, I'm still pretty impressed by what he's done.
I guess I've been wondering myself that first round that came out, there were about 6 of them that came out about 6 months ago, and they were pretty universally panned, and it's enough to make one a little cynical about the whole process and how the process works.
Yeah, most of on the one hand, as some television show was saying just yesterday, that was looking at the memorial that the Pearl Harbor Memorial, that thing that they built over
on top of
the ship that went down.
Right.
That went down. They were saying that memorials take a little time you have to get used to them, and especially if they are new, and if there is something architecturally new about them. And I think this would require some time for people to get used to too. It's got a massiveness that is, on the one hand, very impressive, but I can see people pulling away from as well. Although I think I think one could grow into it, and especially simply because of the way it makes use of garden space. I think that's something that one could become very, very, could live with, and living with that could be a very nice thing for the people, the population of the city. It would be the kind of thing. It could easily become the kind of attraction that the Empire State Building, the Statue of Liberty, and much more than just the windows on the world, which was the restaurant at the top of the World Trade Center, which I went to a few times when I was, it was there, but it's not the kind of thing that you want to make part of your life. And whereas the garden space in Ron's memorial, I can see being the kind of thing that could really become part of the city, as much a part as Riverside Park or Central Park or Washington Square Park or any of the Mount Morris Park or any of the St. Nicholas Park, any of the parks that imbricate themselves with the lives of the people who are actually living here. So that's something I'd really like to see made a part of the memorial. There's a whole movement afoot for simply to have the memorial nothing but park space, without any kind of building at all, which again I can see, but I think this combines the best of that with other things as well. The fact that it offers something to be seen, and then at a place from which to see the rest of the city because of its stepped structure, a place where you can go up and see the rest of the city itself, I think, is a plus over just a simple park space, and you get more space because of the way it's organized and worked out.
New York has a reputation of being very unfriendly toward modern or postmodern architects and architecture. How do you think the city is going to react?
Well, you say friendly or unfriendly. I mean, what is more postmodern architecture than the new 42nd Street? It is the quintessential piece of postmodern architecture. I mean, it's all pastiche. It's all of different styles. It's all which according to Frederick Jameson is the hallmark of postmodern architecture. It's pastiche quality. In fact, indeed, one of the things about Ron's design is that it's not specifically postmodern. If anything, it's a kind of in its without at all being imitative. I think it reverts to a more functional, almost Bauhaus simplicity. Although the particular shape that he's chosen to use is not something that you're going to find in in Corbusier. It's not something you're going to find in Wright. It's not something that you're going to find in any Bauhaus structure, which makes it really original. I mean, it's something that could it's something that could start as style in architecture, and that alone makes it exciting. There are very few new things under the sun, and this would be one of them, and that makes it exciting in itself.
I guess well, you're an authority. I'm not, but I guess when you talk of Times Square architecture, or call that postmodern architecture, I feel like you're dignifying it by calling it architecture.
Well, I'm the guy who wrote the book. Times Square Red, Times Square Blue. I don't love it a lot. I've never been all that wild about that particular kind of pastiche on one hand and jungle gym work on the other hand. I don't think that's the O'Hare Airport. What was the last the O'Hare Airport, the Orly Airport style of architecture, which this jungle gym with glass panes, and it is not my idea of anything that's really beautiful. But again, the fact that Durand's is not that, immediately gets a half dozen votes from me, simply because it isn't that. With every once in a while, the postmodern thing is as I said, all jungle gyms with Egyptian wings, and that's kind of what we see, on 42nd Street. The signage is nice, some of it.
Right.
I like the Low East Side a lot, but you've just about finished most of the things that I could say good about the place. Again, we might live into it. We might adjust to it, and it might turn into something more fun. Although that food court is the most unappetizing place I think I've ever eaten in 7 times.
Which food court is it?
They have a food court that most of the theaters let out into,
God.
and you can go down there and you can get a fairly interesting array of fast foods for fast foods.
Right.
Nothing terribly good, but just the place itself is so you feel like you're going and eating in a hangar,
Right,
in an airplane hangar that was not set up basically for eating.
Which is, I mean, all that stuff. It strikes me as very American, but just not very New York.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's the problem with it. So many. It's like the Starbucks problem, which is to say, it's all well and good, but people go into Starbucks when they want to get out of New York. To go into Starbucks is to walk into a little bit of the Midwest, and that in New York, and it's about as New York as St. Paul, Minnesota.
There is a copy. Would you mind just sort of holding it up and I don't know, maybe if there are particular elements of it that you feel are noteworthy that you.
Well, I think.
I'm sorry. I'm just getting a little bit of a reflection. Maybe if you could just tilt it down a little bit.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
That's good.
The wells, the 2 wells that sit at the precisely at the point where the towers actually were, that's the same ground size as the towers, and they are to be faced with what the towers were faced with, so that when you walk into them, you can, looking up any wall, it's like looking up one of the walls of the towers. That, I think, again, I think that's just a brilliant, brilliant notion. So, and it's one that makes, gives a lot of airiness, internal airiness to the whole thing. It allows for the use of the parks that actually line the steps that are now just indicated with green and with water, that falls from step to step. It makes a variation in the size and the structure of the parks themselves, and the fact that there are two large park areas in the top two steps that are not cut into at all. Which also increases the greenery, and that those are the ones from which you get the major views. There, again, it's just there are a lot of little things that dovetail very nicely in the whole thing. And as I said, and the internal space, the massive office space that this allows is really quite something. The positioning of it is interesting. That it encompasses the site of the actual towers. I can't think of a better way to memorialize the towers themselves than this inside out reconstruction of the towers proper. That, I think, is just extraordinary.
Great. Well, thank you. Is there anything else you wanted to add that we haven't touched on?
No, not that I can think of. As I said, we were all curious to see where it's all going to go, and if I'm also very, very glad that you're documenting people's responses to the whole thing. That's very nice. If only because there are so many people who are offering their views of what a memorial should be. The fact that one of them is getting some, and one of them that isn't moving through the ordinary official, the large firm, the official pass is getting documented, I think is going to be very nice in itself, because a lot of it will mirror the experience of a lot of people, and of course I hope this is this actually gets done.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.